My name is Loredana Hager, and welcome to my kitchen. Today I'm going to show you a recipe that my mom has made very often during my childhood and even later on. And it's a great recipe to be used as an appetizer, but also as the main dish. And this is what we call in the region of Naples, Italy, Palle di Riso, which when translated in English, it means rice balls. Some call this recipe arancini or arancine, which means small oranges in plural. It actually originated in Sicily, in the southern part of Italy. And the way it is made, there is sauce involved. They're shaped in a conical shape, not so much round, and they're quite large. So every region is kind of adapted and modified this original recipe. In the region that I'm from, around Naples, Campania to be exact, we call them Palle di Riso. And actually in my family, we've actually totally gone vegetarian. There is no meat involved, there's just cheese, and the main ingredient is rice. So I will show you in a few minutes the various steps, but more importantly to begin with, the ingredients that are needed and all the utensils that you will have to have in your kitchen to put this recipe together. To begin with, the main ingredient is the rice. It's not just any rice. What I have here is called arborio rice, which is an Italian name, and basically it's a short grain rice. You do not want to use long grain rice because this recipe has to have this type of rice, which is very sticky. It has a lot of starch and it helps it bind it together. And you'll see in a minute why that's so important. So if you can find any kind of short grain rice or arborio rice for this recipe, that's the way to go. Stay away from the long grain rice. You will also need cheese that will go in the recipe. Actually, two types of cheese. One is Parmigiano Reggiano, and you'll see it on the part of the peel that will have the brand of Parmigiano Reggiano. So you will be using some of this, and I'll show you in a minute how much. And the other type of cheese is right here, and it's mozzarella. And basically, it's a fresh mozzarella. The one that I've cut up and I'm showing you in this bowl, it's actually vacuum packed. Sometimes you find it stored in whey. If it is that type of mozzarella that you can find, please drain it. You want to make sure that it's really dry. As you see, I patted it down and I drained it so there is no additional moisture. You want to stay away from low moisture or partly skimmed blocked cheese or mozzarella. You want to use the fresh mozzarella that's made out of whole milk. That's very important for this recipe. So this here is the Parmesan cheese that I just grated for this recipe, about 3 tablespoonfuls. You'll need some butter, about 0.75 ounces. You'll need 1 red yolk and about 2 egg whites. You will also need some just basic white flour, breadcrumbs, nothing with any additional spices, just plain breadcrumbs, some salt, a mixture of salt and pepper. And last but not least, I also have some little small peas. Now, in my family, we do like peas, but not necessarily in this recipe. I just wanted to show you that the original vegetarian Palle di Riso, it contains cheese and the peas. So if you're going to add peas to this recipe, you either can buy the frozen kind and make sure that they're cooked, or if you find them in a can, they're called baby peas, make sure they're drained. They're already partially cooked, so there's no need to further cook them. Just use that, and about 4 ounces of these peas will be enough for this recipe. As well, in terms of the rice, you will need about 1 2/3 cup of this rice, uncooked, for the amount that I've shown you here. In terms of utensils, I've used a scale to weigh some of the food. I have some measuring spoons, some measuring cups, salt and pepper shaker, and of course some vegetable oil, or I use canola oil, but you can use any kind of vegetable oil because we will be frying these rice balls. And then of course a grater for my cheese, and this utensil, this ladle to dunk the rice balls in the hot oil and to retrieve them when they're ready and they're cooked. So these are all the ingredients, all the utensils that you need. So we will go to the next phase, which is showing you what is the first step in putting together le palle di riso. I want to show you what the cooked rice looks like. As I mentioned earlier, this recipe calls for about 1 2/3 cup. When you cook rice, you can use a rice cooker or you can cook it on the stove, on a regular stove top, and in a pot. Of course, always put double the amount of water to the amount of rice that you're cooking. This, as I said, is a very sticky rice, so you want to make sure that it is cooked thoroughly. And what I did when I did cook this rice, I added about a pinch of salt. You can add as much as you like. I don't particularly like too much salt in my food, but you do want to add salt when you're cooking it. Then, before it cools off, you want to add the butter. And the butter that I mentioned earlier, about 0.75 ounces of butter. And then about 3 full tablespoons of that Parmesan cheese, grated Parmesan cheese. And you add it when the rice is still very warm, so it melts easily. Once it's all blended and melted in the rice, as you see, I laid it out in this big dish so that it can cool off. The key is that the rice has to be cool before you add all the other ingredients and start shaping it into a ball. So what I did was, as I said, I mixed the butter and the Parmesan cheese, then I laid it out flat here. When it was warm, not still hot, I covered it a little bit with some saran wrap, cellophane. Just that I did not want to have a thin, dry layer that it would form when the rice starts cooling off. So now I'm ready to add the yolk and also some salt and pepper. Just by the way, earlier when I was sharing with you all the ingredients, I believe I called this a red yolk. And sometimes my Italian gets mixed in with my English. In Italian, the yolk is called rosso, and the egg white is called bianco. Bianco e rosso d'uovo. So I combined the English and the Italian here when I was explaining, but it is a yolk. And so I'm going to be putting this rice that is cooled off and it has Parmesan cheese and butter in this bowl, and we'll be adding the yolk. So I will go ahead and do that. As you can see, as I said, it's very, very sticky, but you want this very key feature of this rice, because remember, we're going to shape these into balls, and we want to make sure that the balls stay together, they don't fall apart when we are going to go ahead and fry them. I'll be adding this mixture of just salt and pepper with this one yolk, and I'm just using a fork just to mix it together. The reason I'm adding this yolk is really the yolk helps it to bind even more. So I'm just going to make sure that it's well blended in the whole amount. And one yolk will be enough for this rice. You can see that I've already started making some. This is not quite the finished product, but the second to last step before, of course, they need to be fried. We have here on this side the rice that I mixed the yolk with, and I have a bowl here with some water. You'll see in a minute how sometimes I need to use it to shape the ball better. And I've got the mozzarella that I'm going to put inside. I also have here some peas, and I'll show you if you like adding peas to this recipe, when you can include it. We'll first put the rice ball once it's shaped. And again, the size that you see here is not necessarily the right size. You can make them bigger or you can make them smaller. It depends if you want to have them as appetizer or as finger food, they can be even more tiny. But once you roll it and you put the mozzarella, and if you prefer, add also the peas, you then roll it in the flour, then in the egg white that I've mixed slowly, just a little bit, and then in the breadcrumbs. Okay, so I'll show you, I'll do a couple just to show you. I'm taking just a large spoon and putting it in the palm of my hand. And you'll see it is kind of sticky. I'm flattening it out a little bit. And then what I'm doing is I'm taking the tiny pieces of mozzarella that I cut up, and that's the purpose why I made them small, so I can put them in the middle. And the reason for putting them in the middle is that once you fry this and you take a bite in it, it will melt and it's right in the middle. It's like a surprise, okay? So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add a little more rice to cover it up. And then I'm just gonna wet my fingers a little bit in the water to help me shape this, because as you can see, it's very sticky. It is a messy recipe, but it's fun. I don't suggest using food preparation gloves because it'll get all over. So you really just need to use your hands. As you can see, it shapes nicely and it's holding together because of the starch in the short grain rice as well as the yolk. Now, if I see that it's still, the mozzarella is not quite covered, I'm gonna add a little more rice because you don't want the mozzarella to come out when you're frying these. Sometimes what can happen, I'm just realizing now, is that if you add too much mozzarella for the amount of rice that you have in your hand, it may not be enough. So you want to make sure that it's totally sealed. Okay, so once you're happy with the shape, I'm gonna just gently roll it in the flour. Shake off the excess flour, just toss it back and forth slightly. Again, it's very delicate. You don't want to mess up the shape. And then you put it in the egg white, and again, just roll it gently. You just want to lightly coat it. And then I want to make sure that all the excess egg white is dripping off before I throw it in the breadcrumb bowl. So that's the last step. Again, gently toss it and just cover it up. And then put them there. Okay. Again, as I said, your hands get kind of messy, so I'm gonna just rinse it just slightly before I start the next one. You may want to do a couple at the same time so that you're not having to do this for every single ball that you're forming. I'm going to show you now, I'm going to add a couple of pieces to the next one that I'm making just to show you and demonstrate how to do that. So again, I'm putting some rice, making kind of a little dimple in it. I'm going to take a few pieces like that. And then I'm going to add a couple of mozzarella pieces. And then I'm going to close it out and add a little more rice. Again, shape it into a ball. And I can guarantee you, the more often you do this, the quicker and the better you'll get at it and how it feels and how it just rolls in your hands. Okay, so it's a nice shapely ball. Again, flour first, gently coat it. Shake off the excess flour. Put it in the egg white. Gently coat it. And then in the breadcrumbs. Now, if you see that either the breadcrumbs or the flour, or even sometimes the egg white, you're running low, just add a little more to your bowl because you want to make sure you have enough of these ingredients to coat the ball. So I'm on the last ball. As you can see, I've used up all the rice. My last one is a little larger than the others, and you'll see in this container I've made 3, 6, 9, 10, 11, 12. Again, as I mentioned earlier, you can make them smaller or you can make them bigger. You will also notice I haven't used all the mozzarella, and so again, your choice how much you want to have, how much you want to put in each ball. I make sure that I don't overstuff it because I don't want it to ooze out when I fry it. What I did have to add was an extra egg white, and that's all based on the size of the egg. You want to have enough egg white to coat each rice ball, so I had to crack another egg. So technically for all of these rice balls, I've used 3 egg whites. So I'm getting ready to do the last one. And as I've been preparing the last one, I've poured the canola oil in a pan that's high enough that I can dunk these in and it won't splatter. And it needs to reach a certain temperature, about 350 degrees. You want it to be hot because when you dunk these in, of course, everything inside is already cooked, but you want it to be become nicely brown all around and hot. Okay, so as you can see, as I said, the last one got a little bigger. So we are finished. We'll go over to the stove and I'll show you how to fry them and then how to eat them. You can see the oil has to be hot. I'm using this pan that's deep enough so they're really deep fried. I put about 3 at the same time. You see I've already cooked about 3, they're already ready. Those took about 1.5 minutes. And again, you want them brown, not burned, but you don't want them too light like right now. You just want to leave it there a little longer and then take them out. You don't want to put too many crowded because then it will lower the temperature of the hot oil. And you want to make sure it stays as consistent as possible, around 350, 360. Earlier when I showed you how to put them together, I was thinking, you know, if you have extra pair of hands in the kitchen, it's great to have people use them as an assembly line, so you don't have to rinse your hands every time you make a rice ball because it is kind of sticky and a little messy. So I think these are ready to take them out. And as you can see, I've put some paper here, some paper towel, just to let the extra oil drain. And I want to make sure. Now these are usually eaten warm, not cold or room temperature. And they're great as leftovers. If you don't have enough people in the house to eat them, you can store them in the fridge and warm them up the next day. So I just want to show you, I'm just putting one gently, one at a time, in the hot oil without splashing, and just rolling them in there. Again, I said a minute and a half. A lot of it will depend also on your stove. I have a gas stove, so just keep an eye on the color more so than the time. But with this stove and the color that you see, I'm averaging about a minute and a half before I take them out. If you have the opportunity to have a thermometer that you can put in hot oil like I have here, be mindful that as you're adding the food and you're doing that several times over and over again, the temperature can drastically drop. So you always have to keep monitoring whether you need to raise the flame, in this case with the gas stove, to make sure that that thermometer or that temperature of the hot oil gets back to being about 350, because you don't want them to be in the oil for too long. So this is the last batch, and we're finished doing the 12 rice balls. I've got this one, it's kind of hot, but you can see the mozzarella is kind of stringy and melting. I just want to mention something. The size of the rice balls that I made, I mentioned earlier to set the oil at around 350. You may want to do it a little lower so that it's cooking slower, so that this mozzarella will be, as you can see it's kind of stringy, because some of the rice balls, like this one that I've just cut in front of you with the peas, the mozzarella hasn't totally melted. So you want to get this kind of feeling. So you want the temperature to be a lower temperature, around 300, 325, so that 1.5 minutes may extend to 2.5 minutes to get them brown. You don't want them to burn, but you want the oil to do its job in the middle for it to melt. So I'm going to take another bite. Delicioso. I hope you get to try these. They are a bit messy. There's several steps, but they're worth the effort. Buon appetito.